Yeah, so welcome everyone. This will be our last, I think, our last major public offering for this school year for the Case OU group. So if you haven't attended a Case meeting before, Case OU stands for the Campus Alliance for Sustainability and the Environment at Oakland University. We seek to create a culture of sustainability on our campus and beyond, minimizing waste on campus and reducing the university's carbon footprint, but also raising awareness about climate change and environmental justice and injustice. And we have monthly speaker programs and lots of other events. Members of the CASE group have organized walks and hikes on campus and in other areas, natural areas around uh, in Southeast Michigan. And this for this month, our speaker is Donald Drife. It's a pleasure to introduce Don. We were students together as undergraduates at Oakland University. Don has been studying the natural world for over 50 years. He's a lifelong member of the Michigan Audubon Society and a longtime member of the Michigan Botanical Society, now serving as the president of the Southeastern Michigan Chapter. He blogs at michigannatureguy.com and presents programs about the natural world for local nature groups. He also serves as the botanist for the Royal Oak Nature Society, identifying plants in the city's two nature parks. Don received his Bachelor of Arts degree in 2015 from Oakland University, majoring in English. He also belongs to the Photographic Society of America, competes in their international photographic salons, and has won 6 medals to date. His work has appeared in Echo Cognitio and Bear River Review, and in his blog at michigannatureguy.com. Today, Don is going to be sharing parts of an essay that was a winner of Oakland University's Writing Excellence Award, as well as talking about his related experiences since writing that essay. He would like to dedicate this talk to the memory of his mentor and friend, Professor Linda McCloskey, who encouraged him to write and truly live. I'll turn it over to Don.
Thank you, Dean. So the other thing that's not in the bio that my wife pointed out is that I've been married to Joyce for 40 years. We also have a small hunting cabin near Grayling that we like to hang out at, but since I've retired, we're not spending much time there. It's not quite the way I had envisioned it, but so this is a rather different style of talk than I usually do. When Dean asked me to talk initially, he asked me to do a talk I have on the milkweed community, so monarchs and whatnot. And then I started getting emails saying, hey, people have read your essays online. They want you to do something a little more along those lines. So this is my attempt at that. So it's based on an essay that I wrote for a writer in nature class taught by Linda McCloskey. It's hard to believe it's been 12 years since I wrote that essay. So Linda taught me to explore nature by writing about it. And interestingly enough, by writing about what I didn't know about nature. So to figure it out by writing about it. I probably have too many images in here from places that are some distance from home. Nature surrounds us. We are part of it, whether or not we believe that. By the time I had met Linda, she was not as mobile as she once was. But I remember showing her the Buckeye butterflies on the lantana planted around O'Dowell Hall on the Oakland campus. And she loved watching the woodchucks on the hill behind the hall. So I plan to quote sections of my essay and talk about a few experiences I've had since then. So from my essay, it starts out, I grieve the loss of a loved one by disappearing into nature. I struggle to see everyday items anew, in a fresh light, and delight when I succeed. I am willing to feel pain because it allows me to feel pure, unadulterated joy. Kathleen Dean Moore created Wild Comfort, the solace of nature, just for me. These themes, my life's themes, reoccur throughout this book. It is a book personally written to guide me on life's journeys. I'm near Grayling, Michigan, walking through the 90 burn. This area of Jack Pine burnt in 1990 during a hot wildfire, burning at a speed of 30 miles an hour, hot enough to vaporize aluminum canoes. It was 15 minutes from consuming our beloved little cabin when the rains extinguished it. I walked this circuit for the first time 10 days later. Birdfoot violets already bloomed from the burnt ground, their divided green leaves and blue flowers appearing in stark contrast with the blackened cinders that littered the sandy ground. Bracken ferns already stood knee-high, their triangular fronds waving defiantly in the breeze. The wind smelled of ash, of acrid odor of charred wood hung in the air. My hands and clothing became black with soot. I walked this circuit after my mother died, taking comfort in nature's endless cycle of death and rebirth. My father and I hiked and photographed here, finding a den of coyote puppies. We discovered sneezewort goldenrod, a white-flowered goldenrod besides the trail. What I saw with my human eyes, I saw destruction, but to nature it was merely a change. Life returned to this burn, a different life in many ways, but a richer life. Continuing on with the essay, I'm sitting on the edge of a mud flat that recently was a beaver pond. It's a warm, sunny autumn day. A turkey vulture soars overhead. After 10 minutes, it is out of sight, never having flapped a wing. I wonder if he's just having fun, just soaring wherever the wind currents take him. A few spotted sandpipers are teetering along, feeding beside the stream. In front of me, cut alder branches stick out of the mud, each end carefully gnawed, the remains of last winter's food cache. Seedlings are staking claim to this mud flat. Wild mint seedlings are emerging, their sweet smell revealing their identity. Rough goldenrods, one of the last flowers to bloom, add yellow streaks along the former meadow. A flock of birds fly into the meadow. At first, I think they are migrating robins. However, they are too small. They are dull brown with a faint double wing bar. Their sides are streaked, and they fly while foraging, calling pip, pip, pipit. They are American pipits, migrating along on their way south. The beavers exhausted their food supply of poplar, willow, and alder and moved to another location. A family moves in, dams the stream, spends 5 to 7 years, runs out of food, and then moves on. This family required 2 lodges and spent 7 years here. The dam is now breached, leaving behind them mud flat of rich black soot with a faint odor of barnyard manure. This rich earth will spawn a wildflower meadow, blooming for several years until the poplars and willows return to shade them out. Then another beaver family will return, patch what remains of the dam, and the 20-odd year cycle will begin again. I have seen 1.5 beaver cycles here and now I wonder if I will see another. So that's the end of my essay quote. So in the 11 years since I wrote my essay, I've watched another cycle at the beaver pond. The beavers returned, repaired the dam, moved back into the lodges, and I've been watching them. I was up a week ago and the dam was breached. So the beavers are gone. So this is once again on its way to becoming a mud flat. So I'll get to watch this cycle once again. This is Sable Falls in the Upper Peninsula. It's now part of Pictured Rock's lakeshore. I visited the waterfalls for the first time in 1970 when I was 12 years old. The parking lot was about 2 miles away. There were no steps down to the waterfall. We went swimming in that lower pool above that last cascade of waterfall. There's a small pool and you can sit under the water. At least you could in 1970 coming off that middle cascade. So when you could walk onto the falls in the 70s, you could see the two types of sandstone that make up the fall. That upper series is a harder sandstone than the lower part. So today you can drive within a quarter mile of the top of the staircase. It's 168 stairs down to the water. There's guardrails to prevent you from getting to the falls. But the falls have not changed much in that time. I like to visit waterfalls and look around the area around the falls. They're usually undisturbed areas, or at least ones that haven't been cut in years. So at Grand Sable, we found oak leaf lichen. It's found in old growth forests. It's very aptly named for those of you who know red oak leaves. It looks very much like an oak leaf. And I read about this when I was a boy, and I looked for it for about 40 years before I found it 3 years ago. As is often the case, once I find something, I keep finding it. So I probably have seen it a dozen places now. So it's about the size of an oak leaf. It's one of our larger lichens, and it grows in that old growth forest along the falls. This is northern green orchid. I found it at the falls last May. It was a species that I had seen at the falls as a boy. It's one of Michigan's native orchids. We've got 50 some species of native orchids. It has a green flower. It's pretty easy to overlook. Most people would pass it by. This one's about a foot high. And it was growing by the boardwalk. So I like to take my time when I visit a waterfall. I ideally like to take my time when I visit any natural area and try to have time just to sit and listen. So when I was at the falls in May, there were black-throated green warblers and yellow-rumped warblers calling. There was a family of young red squirrels playing in the trees. And I just sat on a bench along the staircase and watched people hurry down, spending a few minutes looking at the falls and climbing back up. You know, they never took time to look at their surroundings. Sable Falls is a magnificent waterfall. But when I think of Sable Falls, I think of the orchids, the squirrels, the oak leaf lichen. So nature surrounds us. Through the beauty of Zoom, I'm sitting at my house. I don't know if you can hear it through the Zoom, but there's a Carolina wren singing outside the window. That's a new addition to the bird life around here in the last couple of years. They're making their way north again and becoming quite a common bird. If you learn the call, you'll run into them. So I met my wife on a whitewater raft trip sponsored by Michigan Audubon. We traveled out by two vans from Grayling, Michigan. We went out through Glacier National Park, rafted the middle fork of the Salmon River, and came back through Yellowstone. So for our 25th anniversary, we went back to Glacier and Yellowstone. We rode the train out to Glacier and traveled down to Yellowstone. And on that trip, we found mountain goats at Logan's Pass. I like to tell people we carried our camera gear up the mountain and waited patiently for the mountain goat to appear. If you look at the base of that shot, you can see a couple of people's heads. So this was right at the edge of the parking lot. There were mountain goats and bighorn sheep roaming through the parking lot. There was a park ranger pounding on a metal garbage can lid with a large metal spoon as she walked through the parking lot trying to scare the animals back into the woods, but they didn't care. I think the cropped photo is better. It's all about perspective. So that could very well be in the middle of nowhere. You can't tell from the photo that I'm standing in a parking lot when I took that picture. Back to my essay. I'm kneeling on the forest floor, setting up a spotting scope to look at a Cooper's hawk nest. The eyepiece is less than 3 feet off the ground. I'm showing a brownie troop through Tenhave Woods in Royal Oak, and the female Cooper's hawk is perched alongside the nest. The brownies take turns looking at the hawk as its mate returns to the nest. He has a sparrow in his bill and starts to feed the female. One of the girls spies the sparrow before I do and is upset. I explain that this is part of the cycle of life, and if sparrows and mice were not eaten, there would soon be too many of them. The girls accept this, much to my surprise. I am again in Tenhave Woods, but now it is night, a cold, cloudy night with a sharp wind biting right through clothing to your bones. I pray that no one will turn out to walk through a snowy, dark woods, but the Royal Oak Nature Society has scheduled an owl hoot, and it's my turn to lead. During an owl hoot, a tape recording of an owl calling is played. With luck, an owl answers, and if the group is still and quiet, an owl sometimes flies in close enough to be seen. 20 people gather, and to my surprise, the group includes a small child, about 4 years old, bundled up against the wind and the cold, with only his glasses visible. He dearly wants to see an owl in the wild, so he came with his mother to the owl hoot. Walking quietly from the parking lot to the edge of the woods, we paused to play an owl recording of a screech owl. It is a still moonless night. The only sound is a distant barking dog. We move to the center of the woods. The young boy walks quietly with the rest of the group and stands patiently as I play the recorded call again. A dark shape appears on a branch, maybe 5 feet over the child's head. Shining my flashlight on it, it reveals a red phase of an eastern screech owl. The kids let out the first sound I have heard from him, a squeal of pure delight. He remains mesmerized by that owl as it stealthily flies from branch to branch. It never calls, but it puts on a fabulous show for us. I have probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of screech owls in my life. They nest in a tree in my front yard and are a common sight to me. However, the encounter with this owl will be long remembered. The act of sharing something that is familiar can make it feel as if I am seeing it for the very first time. I saw that owl through the eyes of a young boy and shared in his excitement. This might not be a lasting memory for this youngster, but I will never forget his first owl. So leaving the essay, my wife and I spent 2 nights in a cabin on the edge of the Grand Canyon. I'd never visited the canyon before, and I was told that I would be overwhelmed at the sight. I wasn't. It was an impressive canyon that no photo can do justice to, but I wasn't awestruck by the canyon. It was an interesting time. So the next night, or actually morning, I woke up about 3 a.m. I saw that the sky was clear and decided to try my hand at shooting some star trails over the canyon. It was a short walk to the edge of the canyon. I set up my camera on a tripod and stood there just clicking the shutter every 30 seconds. It's pretty mindless work, actually. I was there for a few minutes and a western screech owl began calling from a ponderosa pine directly behind me. I never saw the bird. I just sat on the stone wall by the edge of the canyon, pushing the shutter button. I spent several hours feeling the cold, listening to my newfound owl friend, and looking at the canyon in the moonlight. It was a great way to begin a day. I had intended to be out for maybe an hour and then return to bed, but I couldn't pull myself away from the magic of that night. We had made arrangements to take a bus out and photograph the sunrise over the canyon. So we took sunrise pictures. It was not a spectacular sunrise, a little too many clouds. We had breakfast and wandered the south rim of the canyon for the day. We had dinner and then went and took sunset pictures. Sunset was a little more impressive. We had walked about 10 miles that day. I took my first photo around 3 a.m. and my last photo about 10:30 p.m. It was a very memorable day. And it took me about 8 months to sort through photos when we got home. So this is Artist's Point at Yellowstone. My wife and I spent a few days in a canyon, in a cabin in Yellowstone on our glacier trip. We visited Artist's Point one morning and sat there and waited for the light to reach the falls. So there were mountain chipmunks keeping us company as we sat on the bench. There were magpies and mountain chickadees providing entertainment. We walked away from the first overlook down to the second overlook because it was a little better view of the falls. And we watched people drive in, get out of their cars, maybe take a picture, and then leave. They had seen the falls. But we spent time there watching how the light changed in the canyon, listening to the various wildlife around us. It was quite an enjoyable morning. We then walked down to the Upper Geyser Basin, and we watched Old Faithful erupt a couple of times. We picked out a spot to stand and photograph the setting sun behind the geyser. We wanted to see the geyser erupting at sunset. We knew the time of sunset and the predicted erupting times, plus or minus 10 minutes, are posted all over the park. This was before the years before the National Park Service developed their geyser app. So on our second day, the predicted time of the geyser eruption was exactly at sunset. So we jumped in the car and we made the 40-mile trip, headed to our spot, set up our tripods. And as the time for the eruption came closer, there were 40 of us standing in what we thought was the best spot. There were several hundred people who just walked in from the parking lot and sat on the bleachers by the parking lot. Our spot was around the walkway, maybe a quarter of a mile. And we sat there with tripods and waited. So at sunset, the geyser was just steaming slightly. There was a little more steam after sunset. And we sat there. The sky was gorgeous, but no geyser. By the time the geyser went off, most of the color had left the sky. It was still the blue hour, but I would have been happy with a little more light and color. But it was nice to sit there and anticipate the eruption and to share that anticipation with 40 other photographers. I wasn't disappointed that the eruption came plus 10 minutes. So it was later than predicted. It gets pretty dark quickly in the mountains. So we pulled out of the parking lot and immediately stood on the brakes because there was an American bison in the road. So it took us 2.5 hours to get back to our cabin. It wasn't part of the plan, but we did see several bison, mule deer, and a few elks. So you could not go very fast in the dark at Yellowstone. So these are shots from the Hummingbird Cafe in Costa Rica. We spent a morning there. The cafe has about 30 hummingbird feeders, and they go through 3 to 5 gallons of sugar water a day. And my wife and I went to Costa Rica with Pat and Ray Coleman, who were both gifted nature photographers. And I've learned much over the years from Ray. So this is a green violet ear hummingbird. The cafe was a fun experience. Talk about roughing it in nature. Periodically, someone would show up to refill your latte. So all you had to do was select a hummingbird feeder, set up your camera, and wait to see what would come by. This was a purple-throated mountain gem is in flight. And so we photographed a dozen species of hummingbirds that morning. And it was quite a memorable time. This is a violet saberwing. It's the only photo I've got of one. I would like to get a better photo sometime. That hummingbird is about 6 inches long. It's the longest hummingbird on the South American mainland. There's a Cuban giant that's out on the island of Cuba. That's probably half again as big. But it was a fun morning shooting hummingbirds and just listening to their sounds and their calls. So we spent a week at the Selva Verde Eco Reserve. And one evening, Ray and I got to go off on our own, exploring the reserve, Ray giving me pointers on how to shoot. And we found a horse lover grasshopper. That grasshopper is about 4 inches long. One of the walking sticks. Now, I've seen walking sticks in Michigan, but they're not quite that big. And what we really wanted to see was a red-eyed tree frog. So after a couple of hours of poking around, we finally found a single frog. We hadn't seen them all week. Um, it's kind of the poster child for tree frogs, very colorful frog. So when I was in Costa Rica, I was 55 at the time, and Ray was 85. It was one of the last times we were in the field together, but I learned quite a bit from him at that along that trip, how to shoot and just how to find and understand nature. So he knew many of these animals and how they would behave. You never know what you're going to find. We were in Utah. We took the train out, rented a car. We like to travel by train. And this was a travel day. We were these are the Sand Island petroglyphs in Utah. And we found this little site on the map. It was just a quick stop on a travel day. And we needed a place to stop and eat the sandwiches that we carried with us. So there's some 3,000-year-old petroglyphs, and there's about 200 feet of carved rock. Well, as we were getting back into the car, a bit of movement caught my eye. It was a broad-winged hummingbird, and he was pollinating the claret cactus. I did not get a picture of the hummingbird, but this is one of the few cacti, that I've seen in flower in the wild, and it was absolutely gorgeous. A little closer to home is the Mary McDonald Preserve at Horseshoe Harbor in Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula. It's an aptly named harbor. There's a dike of volcanic rock that helps seal up the harbor. So it goes right out into Lake Superior. It's a beach of conglomerate rock, nice smooth rocks, and it's a favorite place for me to go and just sit. Just to sit on those smooth stones and watch the lake and see what flies by. There were half a dozen species of warblers calling when I was there in May. I spent a couple of mornings there when I was camping up at Fort Wilkins. I would drive in the morning and just enjoy the beach. The edges of it are volcanic rock, and there are various rock plants growing out of it, and also some that I consider to be bog plants. So the pink is Great Lakes primrose, and those wide leaves are butterwort, which is an insectivorous plant. Upper part of the leaves are sticky, and insects wander onto them and they get stuck and they're digested. The harbor is interesting. Lake Superior was not that warm in May, but I wanted to get a shot. Of course, I don't think it's any warmer in July, but I spent maybe 3 minutes in the water getting the picture. And I think it tells a lot of the character of the harbor. And you find these conglomerate rocks there that have the sandstone's been pressurized. It's a real interesting place. I think I've got about 100 species of plants listed from that area now. And it's just a fun place to go, not a lot of people. and just a gorgeous place to go and get back in touch with nature. A little closer to home, this is out at Kensington. So there's a stump on the edge of the lake there that I like to go and sit on and watch the sun come up. So I'll get there before sunrise and set up a camera and just sit on the stump and enjoy nature, and occasionally trip the remote of the camera and take a few pictures. Kensington is a fun place to go. A lot of the wildlife is accustomed to people. So you can get shots of the great blue herons roaming around. There's eagles. There's a pretty good variety of wildlife out there. We could do a talk on just what I've photographed out at Kensington. But like I said, you don't have to go far to find nature. This is a pair of wood duck drakes. The one is trying to interest a female that is just off to the right of the photo. And this was at the Detroit Zoo, on a log in the lake at the Detroit Zoo. And I just happened to be there. And it's a pretty good place to enjoy nature. This katydid was in my yard. It's on a goldenrod in the yard. We have a pollinator-friendly garden. A lot of natives, and we get a lot of birds, insects, a lot of wildlife through the yard. So if I can't get out anywhere, I can grab a camera and go out and sit in the yard here. 2 years ago, we had a late snow. So that's bellwort. That's one of the wildflowers in the yard. And yeah, it got down in the 20s. There was snow on the bellwort. I went over the 10-hay woods, and the trillium were already in flower. So the red trillium were in flower and snow covered. And the white trillium were encased by snow. The plants did recover. It warmed up later that day, and the plants were fine. Some of them got broke off by the weight of the snow, but other than that, there was no damage done to the plants. This is up near the cabin. We knew there was a comet. This is Comet Neowise. And so we went over to the Connors Flat impoundment and set up a tripod and waited for the comet to appear. It never did to the naked eye, but this is a 30-second exposure, and it would appear in the camera. We'd bring the comet out. So we spent several hours over there taking various pictures of the comet. The mosquitoes were some of the worst I've ever seen. You had to take a piece of cardboard and wave it in front of the camera lens to move the cloud of mosquitoes out of the way before you fired the shutter. So that was an interesting experience. So I think my wife spent about half an hour with me and went back and sat in the car and let me enjoy the mosquitoes and the comet. We were up on the north shore of Lake Superior. We went up with a group from the city of Troy up to ride the Polar Express. And this was the north end of the Polar Express. There's 3 waterfalls at the end of the train ride. And I got out to explore the waterfalls, and there was a mink. And this mink was just having a riot. It would come out, and I chased it for half an hour, or he played with me for half an hour. He would dive into the underbrush and he'd rattle the underbrush, and then he'd pop out. And we followed I followed a stream for probably half a mile with him just dancing around in front of me and occasionally coming out and posing. And he seemed to be having a riot. But of course, I didn't have what I would want to photograph him. I would like longer lenses and other things, but I think I got a pretty good shot. This is the bog. Friend has a private bog near Grayling, and we go in winter. We don't get enough snow up there anymore to be able to do this. This is from about 10 years ago, and we snowshoed into the bog. The plant remnants there are picture plant seed pods. So the bog is a fun place to go and explore. We get an occasional bald eagle. There are picture plants, another carnivorous plant. So there are downward pointing hairs in that leaf and water at the bottom of the leaf, and the insects crawl in and they can't get out. And the plants digest the insects. So they're getting copper out of the insects. They need copper to maintain. You can put copper sulfide into the leaves too to keep them alive. There's a species of mosquito, Wyomii smithii. The larvae live in the picture plant. That's where they develop. So that's an interesting relationship. This is dragon's mouth orchid, Arethusa bulbosa. I've seen Arethusa, I've probably photographed Arethusa every year since about 1972. It's maybe 4 inches tall. I know half a dozen places where it grows in the state. It's one of our native orchids, one of our prettiest wildflowers, I think. And one day I'm going to get a photo that I like of it. I must have shot tens of thousands of photos of this over the years. But it's in a habitat. It's hard to get the plant in an area where it's open enough, and then get down in a bog so your feet are always wet when you're photographing this. It's a great time. So my latest adventure was about a week ago. We went chasing the solar eclipse. We went down to Waynesville, Ohio, so we could watch a total eclipse. And I was not prepared for this. This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in the natural world. And I haven't had enough time to process it. So that's the beginning of the eclipse. And then just before totality, and totality was incredible. It by the time totality ended, it was 25 degrees cooler. The light did not look right. Totality comes on instantly. I was not prepared for that. It's just in a flash. That shadow's traveling at 1,500 miles an hour. And the people just gasp. I stood there for a good minute, just in awe, before I thought I should probably fire a camera shutter. There was twilight, 360 degrees around you. It was just incredible. We were under totality for almost 4 minutes. According to the Smithsonian app, we were 150 yards off the center line of totality. It was just incredible. And when I was in McCloskey's class, Linda's class, she introduced me to Annie Dillard. And she has an essay called Eclipse. And I want to read a paragraph from it. I had seen a partial eclipse in 1970. A partial eclipse is very interesting. It bears almost no relationship to a total eclipse. Seeing a partial eclipse bears the same relationship to seeing a total eclipse as kissing a man does to marrying him, or flying in a plane does to falling out of an airplane. Although the one experience precedes the other, there is no way it prepares you for it. So with that, I'm running about 45 minutes. Dean said keep it to about 45 minutes. And are there any questions?
I can start with a question I have. So you've obviously had so many experiences capturing the shots that you think are pretty great. And there have also been times where you talked about, I've photographed this 1,000 times and still I haven't captured what I want to. I guess I'm most interested in the experiences you've had where you were either overcome by a sense of awe or the moment escaped you. How many, what are the first examples you think of a time where you went, oh, I didn't get a shot of that at all, but it's more indelibly impressed on your memory than anything you photographed?
Um, that happened quite a bit. Let me see. I was 14 when I got my first camera, and I was in a photographing family. So we were out doing nature walks. And I remember seeing orchids or seeing birds and just experiencing the bird and never thinking to even raise the camera. And so it's a little less common now. The photography is a little more ingrained in me. But the eclipse was one. If the guy next to me hadn't fired a shutter, I would have stood there. That was and I'm not sure I would have been upset. It was just a neat experience. And like I said, that's one I haven't worked through. I haven't processed, so that's going to take a while. I can't even write about it. It's just, yeah, I thought I knew all about eclipses, and we were out on a early one year. There was still ice on the lake, and my friend and I took a canoe out on Muskrat Lake, and a flock of 40 trumpeter swans came. It was a beautiful day, blue sky, and this V of swans flew in, landed among us, and then took off and flew out in a V. And yeah, I had a camera with a telephoto lens sitting in my lap and never took a shot, never tried. So yeah, it probably happens more than I care to admit, actually. So yeah, the experience is always is more the thing. If I can capture it, I can explain it. The eclipse is not that. Things like the Grand Canyon are not that. There's no way to put it on film. Because my wife said, yeah, you said there's no way to put the Grand Canyon on film, but you shot 3,000 images. Well, I tried.
If anyone else has questions, you feel free to unmute and you can ask your question or you can leave it in the chat.
There's one from Sarah in the chat, Dean.
Yeah, so Sarah asks, do you write based off of your photos, like looking back and reflecting on it, or do you write in the moment in nature?
The best writing is in nature. It's what I experience, and Linda taught me that. If I write off the photos, I describe the thing. If I write in nature, I describe what I felt. I describe the feeling. So I will often walk. I seldom walk without a notepad. I will often walk without a camera. And then a lot of these things, a lot of like, particularly the plants, I can walk back with a camera and take a picture. But those initial experiences. And in the essay I write, and that was 12 years ago, that I'm keenly aware that I'm experiencing more things for the last time than experiencing for the first time. Oh, yeah, 12 years later, that's more apparent, and is that my last total solar eclipse? It's my second try at one, but will I see another one? 2045. We've got one here, but I'd love to have that experience again and see if I could make sense out of it.
I
I
would
wanted
be,
to thank
oh,
you.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you for this presentation. It's so meditative and so relaxing. And I think you're kind of bringing us into your experience, and it's really, really healthy and healing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question comes out of work that my partner and I, Lily Mendoza, are doing and trying to relearn a more indigenous way of being, where the understanding in part is that landscape shape bodies, that when we're really ourselves growing up in a community in a particular ecology, that ecology will sort of train us emotionally and our motor memory and our thinking. And of course, most of us have not grown up that way, but we're doing what we can to recover it. That's all prefaced to saying, do you find any particular landscape that feels more home to you than another, or particular plants or animals where something in you might sort of go, oh, maybe that's me, or maybe I'm more than just human?
I've spent a lot of time up in Grayling in the Jack Pine area, which my fellow botanists say, you hang out where? Because it's not the most diverse part of the state as far as plants are concerned, but there's a lot of interesting things up there. That fire ecology is an incredible thing to watch. And that kind of feels like home. If I'm away from that too long, like I am right now, hopefully I will be spending the night at the cabin today.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it being that close.
Yeah, Yeah.
But we're losing that connection with nature.
Yeah.
You know, people don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a good thing if the earth gets warmer. What do we care? Well, you know, it's going to mess with things.
Yeah.
So we were out
Yeah.
watching. We were
I grew up
looking.
in Cincinnati.
Oh,
I grew up in Cincinnati, which is hilly compared to Detroit, where we are now. We have a street on the east side of Detroit called Mount Elliott, and for more than 40 years, I've been trying to find the mount that it's named after. But I find when I drive, like in the last few years, I've driven to visit friends in North Carolina, and when I get to Cincinnati and from there south into Kentucky, I begin weeping. And it's not a precise memory. It's not particular childhood experiences that float up. It's just something about the entire ensemble of sight and smell and glance of the light and bodily sensation. Yeah.
yeah. That's another essay about the cabin where I talk about that up north smell, that combination of sweet fern and balsam poplar and pine. That is the smell of up north, particularly in that area. And, you know, my wife grew up in Flint, but it's her family cabin. So I think she was taken to the cabin when she was 3 weeks old for the first time. And, you know, it's an area that we know. And I don't see a lot of new plants up there. If it's something that's new, it's probably something that's bad and is moving in. You know, because I've been up there for 40 years. So, you know, I pretty much, well, I used to say I would pretty much know what I'm going to see. But we're probably 5 weeks early in the season up there this year. It's unbelievable. There were stuff that were through flowering before it should have started. And that gets a little upsetting. And then we're seeing certain insects that are daylight. They come out based on length of daylight. So they're coming out and the plant they feed on is done. It's already bloomed because it's temperature. If everything just shifted 5 weeks, it wouldn't be so bad. But some things shift and some things don't. And we simply just do not know how all this stuff is interconnected. It's scary. So hopefully I'll spend tomorrow with a naturalist friend who is my age. And, you know, we've been, you know, doing this all our lives. And sometimes it can get outright depressing when we start talking, when we see something. And hopefully the season's getting retarded up there, but I don't know why it would. We don't plow our cabin, and I can drive in there year round now. We used to have 8 feet of snow at the cabin. But yeah, we don't snowshoe into the bog anymore. We used to do that every year. You know, it'd be 10 to 20 below zero, and you know, we'd go in for 3 days and, you know, drag our sleds in and carry in water. And no, I can get my little 2-wheel drive car into the bog and into the cabin now. So, and it's a fire environment, so it's a lot drier.
Yeah.
So it's scary dry up there now.
Lily, did you have a question?
Yeah. Not sure if it's so much a question as a remark. At the beginning, when you were reading your essay, you talked about pain as a prerequisite to joy. But and you titled your talk "Nature's Comfort." I think for modernized people like us, we typically think of going into nature to find comfort, right? But not really willing to go through discomfort to actually experience wild nature. And so the instinct is always to tame those wild places and make them comfortable and palatable for us whose bodies are over domesticated. And so can you talk a little bit more about?
So having done work in a fire environment, jack pine is probably, the environment is probably healthiest if it burns every 30 years. So we have 13 acres of jack pine up there with a cabin in the middle of it. And that hasn't burnt since 1910. So if I want a healthy woods, I should set it on fire. But I'd take out the cabin and most of the neighborhood. I would have some thoroughly upset neighbors if I set that wood on fire. But if that wood started, there's no way they're going to stop it. There's fuel on the ground. It's rosin coated wood. It's an environment that's designed to burn. So when a fire gets up there, going up there, and this is the time of year for them, they burn hot, they burn fast. So, looking at the 90 burn, which was in 1990, the first time I walked through that, I considered it destruction. Well, it isn't, it's a renewal. And now we're 34 years later, and it's ready for another fire, for it to be happy. We're getting jack pine, we're getting a lot of down timber now. A lot of the jack pine, it's a short-lived tree, so a lot of it's down. The blueberries are there, but they're not producing fruit. It's I know that the burns can be beneficial as long as it's not too close to my cabin. But we'll have a wildfire up there in the next week. It's that time of year, and my friends tell me, as they say, it's scary, scary dry. When you see the locals and they have a trailer packed in the driveway so they can pull out quickly, it's the dry season up there. But so it's hard to say what is a pain in nature. It's all part of a process that I don't fully understand. If I live long enough, another century or so, maybe I will.
Unless there are any more questions, I can maybe wrap up with one last question. Don, you talked about reading Annie Dillard, both as a student at Oakland University with Professor McCloskey, and now preparing for the solar eclipse, revisiting her essay on the total eclipse. Anyone who has interacted with me before knows that Annie Dillard is very dear to my heart as well. And it prompts me to ask what other inspirations or mentors have you had, whether they be writers or botanists, people you admired that taught you about the natural world, or writers that offered consolation with regard to nature, that have really stood out to you in your life?
I've had a whole slew of people who have helped me through the years. Naturalists, botanists, birders. The family was well connected. So I just grew up knowing Wagner and Voss and all these people who wrote the books that I used. And But as far as writing goes, Edwin Waite-Teal was an important influence. His 4-year through the season, 4-book through the seasons. I've been reading that every year for 50 years. I'm now on my 4th set because I wear them out. His North with the Spring. And, you know, they're just classic, his descriptions and his knowledge that he gives through his books. Burroughs is another one, though he romanticizes a bit for my taste. But there's still a lot to learn from him, and a lot of the stuff he was writing about is when we were learning about it. You know, we were learning about the West and what was out there. So Burroughs is a good mentor. You can go a long way with Burroughs. And there's some other minor people. Keith Taylor, who taught at U of M. Keith has retired and he has written mainly poetry. But he has a book of prose poems that's about nature. And he's an excellent naturalist. He's primarily a bird watcher. And his books are worthwhile. I think his complete poems are coming out this month.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Don, for giving this talk today, and thank you to everyone who attended. If you're watching the recording and you want to sign up to stay in touch with the Case OU group and catch our future offerings, the website, you can Google Case OU, the Campus Alliance for Sustainability and the Environment. Our website is sites.google.com/oakland.edu/case-OU. I would put this in the chat, but if you're watching the recording, I don't think you can see that. But again, you can just Google Case OU, and we do lots of events, both in person and speaker events online. And so with that, I'll conclude today's talk. Thank you all again.
Thank you